כחלק מהרצון לשתף כמה שיותר סיפורי הצלחה, נפל בעצם בידינו המזל הגדול שאלון כהן, מי שהקים את VocalTec והמציא את ה-Voice over IP, במקרה היה בארץ והסכים לבוא לדבר ולשתף אותנו בסיפור שלו, מאיפה הוא התחיל, איזה קשיים הוא עבר בדרך, ובעצם להראות לנו את כל הבלגן שכולנו עוברים, והייתי שמח להזמין אותו. כפיים לאלון.
Okay, so Alon Cohen, I'm the co-founder of a company called VocalTec. VocalTec was established in '89 by myself and a dear friend, Leo Haramati, but we actually started working on the project maybe 2 years before that. So it took a long time to get to where VocalTec was when I left it and even today. It's a long story. I'm going to try to show some of the interesting points maybe, and if people have questions later on, they can always email me and I'll try to answer. And I'll show some examples. So I'm going to talk about the VocalTec history a bit, something about mentorship and, you know, listening to other people, and maybe, you know, doubt if you should actually believe what I say. And then talk about some of those and give some examples of those pivot points, which was a new term for me, but we actually apparently experienced a lot of those. And try to give you a few words of advice from my experience, you know, in a take it or leave it fashion. So the history was, as I said, '89 officially. VocalTec was officially declared as a company. We were two geeks, you know, garage operation, and we started actually developing sound cards for PCs. At the time, there wasn't any sound cards, there wasn't any, you know, sound blaster, and PCs didn't even have color, it was green. And we got a gift of $4,000, I don't know if it's lean enough or not, but that was the gift we got from Leo's dad to actually start something. For a few years, we kind of tried to survive. We were building those sound cards, trying to refine the software around it, and trying to come up with different applications and things that would actually use that technology. And one of them was actually the music that you hear in the ice cream trucks. And the problem was that those companies had those trucks, and the drivers didn't have a place to put the music box for the music. So they were putting it inside the freezer. And obviously, they come up in the morning, it's all frozen up, it doesn't work. So they had to find a solution for, you know, playing music electronically in a way that they could put it in the freezer. So we had the technology, we had the sound card, we could record, we created an editor, so we could the voice and so on, and recorded the music from this music box and created those standalone, you know, MP3 players for those truck drivers. Then we moved on to smart signs. You know, we had a sign in Canion, where, you know, it showed some animation at the time, and then music alongside with this, because initially it was a silent movie. And every time we kind of met different companies. One of them was Future Screens, and they decided to do a campaign for Awesome, and we had this coffee commercial recorded. So you would go near the sign, it would play the commercial, and so on. It was all related to the same technology of recording voice, playback of voice, sometimes, in most cases, standalone, or like in signage, it was, you know, to a PC. But all the time we were thinking, you know, what could be the market for that? Because we knew it's, you know, it's going to be interesting to have voice on the computer, but what is actually the market? And we tried to explore different opportunities. And then we heard from somebody who works in the Ministry of Defense that they have a lot of unfortunate veterans that lost their sight during wars in Israel. So if we could solve the problem somehow. So we had to create this Hebrew text-to-speech and wrote some program that really helped a lot of people here. You know, use computers, Einstein, if anybody remembers, which is a Hebrew editor, word processor. Basically all based on DOS and so on. And we moved to banks and kiosks in banks, you know, giving you some help and all kind of different applications. And then we were trying to reach to the US market. The way it came to be is we were participating in some event for some educational event, because people were also trying to write software that has some education programs that had voice in them. And we found somebody who was actually very excited about it, a doctor. His name was Dr. Elon. And he said, you know what, I'm excited about this program and this voice capability. Let me try and sell it overseas. And he became our marketing arm in the US, basically, and then eventually became one of our partners in the company. But in the meantime, we had to deal with the Israeli, I guess, the Israeli reality. In the process of for marketing partners, we came across those two guys that eventually we found out were carpenters. But that was before they were selling kitchens. And so, but we didn't know they were selling computers at the time. So, and they had a very unique system that of creating startups, call it lean startup. They were leech to somebody who has something new, do as if they try to sell it, drain the company for whatever revenue it has, and then take a lot of debt, and then declare bankruptcy. And leech startup. So, but we were, it took us maybe a year to figure out that this is what they're doing. And, you know, we were going to meetings that we thought were going well, and then we came back and we got a call, you know, we don't want to do business with you. So that was kind of strange to us until we eventually, somebody said, oh, you're working with those guys? So we said, you know, but we had agreements and, you know, we couldn't just leave without non-compete and so on. So we had to actually buy back our shares of the company, which was painful, but eventually was the right move to do. So moving back to like 1993, we had a sales office in New Jersey. We had a few interesting customers, and we're trying to find out. We're trying to penetrate this voice market of the PC. We're actually creating it, and it was not easy. It was a very slow process. And then one day we wake up, and there are those two Chinese people creating a soundboard with millions of dollars of marketing money from some American marketing company. And we were just left with no market because everybody was now asking for Sound Blaster compatibility. And what they did was smart. They actually read the market much better than we did. We had a very high-quality recording playback device. But at the time, you know, PCs had a floppy disk, right? There wasn't enough memory to do anything significant with playback and recording. And those guys added the chip that's actually playing back notes. And if you play the notes and you don't just sample and record the voice, you can do a lot of music with almost no memory and no storage. And this is the kind of music that you remember from the games, from Pac-Man and so on, you know, just those notes that later on became MIDI and so on, which is easy to play on a chip that was taken from, you know, those keyboards, those electronic keyboards. And so that was, and the recording and playback they did very poorly, but this was the feature that actually got the attention with all the developers. And they actually came with a truck to one of the trade shows and gave every developer on the floor like a free sample, which we could never do. So they just took the market completely, and we couldn't do anything. What was lucky at the time for us is that we did just raise money from Pitango at the time. And Yossi Vardi actually came to see us. He was working for Pitango as a consultant, I guess. He came to do some due diligence and look at what we do. And he said, and we had this black box there. And he said, you know, he said, it's not, he told Pitango, it's not going to work, but there are good people, you should invest. And they actually gave us the money to create a longer runway. And we continued to evolve that because the first but the first big prospect was Lotus, because they understood they have a problem in educating people in using Lotus 123 in the corporate, because it didn't have voice, and they wanted to create teaching software that would teach people how to use that with voice and so on. And they couldn't expect people to open computers and put a sound card, so they wanted something that connects on the back to the computer printer port. And we had that technology. And eventually, the story was that we didn't get the deal, but we got a lot of PR from that. Because the other American company that was competing could not deliver the technology on time when Lotus had the press release. And we were just there saying, you know what, why don't you try our device? And it worked, and everything was amazing, and we got so much PR from this because everybody was very excited about what this box in the back that does all these interesting things. But the thing is, we didn't really have a market because Lotus understood that they couldn't change their cost of goods from $1 of a CD to $100 of a device and still make money out of it. So they just put an insert saying, if you want a sound, buy this from VocalTec, which was good, but it's not good enough. So we decided that, and that's kind of one of those pivot points, because we said, we can't compete in this audio card market. So we sat down and we said, what is our core competency in the company? So we understand telephony because some of us came from some communication background, education, the Army, 5 years here and there, communication wing, and so on. So we understood telephony. We obviously understood computers. We were, geeks. And we understood very well the integration of computers and audio from our days in the sound cards. And we said, and we bet that every computer is going to have voice. So the only conclusion is that we could get to is, let's build a phone. Phone was maybe the largest industry at the time, maybe still is. So, so we said, let's build a phone that's completely different than the phone that we know today. And let's start with the local area network and try to replace the office phone system. And that's how we came to the voice over IP. Well, not voice over IP first, because IP was not in the local area network. It was Novell and BIOS and so on. And eventually, we understood that we decided that this is what's we're going to do, and we just started building it.
The original product was to communicate within a network ruling.
Yeah.
And now over the internet. Now over the internet.
Exactly. So, but we didn't know anything about the network, right? So we're thinking, you know, if IBM in Haifa, the research center would sit down and decide what's needed for the voice to go over the network, they would buy very expensive equipment and check for packet loss and so on. And eventually we said, you know what? It's going to be only three things: packet loss, packets don't arriving on time, and maybe the sound cards don't have the same sampling rate. And we said, so let's build a technology that solves all those problems and be done with it. We can check it, but you know, let's build the technology and see how it works. And this is exactly what we did. And even when we asked people if it can be done, people from Bell Labs and so on, they said never. It's never going to work. But you know, we had this vision, right? And we said, and it's a big market. So if we succeed to solve that big problem, would probably be a good thing to do. This was around 93. And we actually did the product and started selling it and so on. And we were selling, you know, sound card and the software, and people were buying it. And then we get this customer support call from somebody saying, you know, it doesn't work on my network. And we're trying to figure out what's going on. And it turns out this guy is talking from, I think it was Paris to London or something like that. And he says, it doesn't work. How much bandwidth do you have? He says, oh, I have 32 kilobit per second. And we were using ULAW, which is 64 kilobit per second. But we did have a compression button on there. So, you know, press that button. So he pressed that, it worked, he was very happy about it. And at the time, you have to go back a few years, long distance calling was very expensive. It's not what it is today. Right. So people were looking for any way to save on that type of long distance communication. And this is where we understood that this is where we should go. Because, you know, local area network is nice, but if we solve that problem for the bigger picture, the bigger networks, that's where the money is.
How much bandwidth was being used in the compressed mode?
32.
Oh, 32.
Yeah, it was like 80 PCM.
Okay.
So this was really, you know, a wake-up or enlightenment for us, right? We said, you know, this is what we should do, and what's the biggest network? And the biggest network was the internet. But the internet wasn't public yet. It was only universities and so on. So we had to define VocalTec as a research center, and then we got connected, and then we could start doing some tests. So, but the reality was very different than what's happening on the local area network. We had all this nice technology, but you know, on the network we didn't really have any problems. But here we had modems, you know, 14.4 kilobit modems. That's how people were connecting to the internet. Every time you actually dial into the internet, you had a different address. So how do you dial somebody who has a different phone number every time they connect the phone, right? Yeah, we had to solve that problem. And sound cards were not full duplex. They couldn't play and record at the same time. So how do you build a phone system that's not full duplex? And obviously all the network problems that we anticipated to have now existed, right? Except one that we didn't even anticipate before, which was easy to solve, that some of the packets were coming up twice instead of once. So yeah, latency was an issue, obviously, but that was part of the solution. Because latency, you know, there's latency of how much time it takes packet to get from one side to the other. But if this timing changes, then you need to create some sort of buffering mechanism, right? And if the buffer is too big, then you have to, that's what we do today. We press YouTube, right? And it's buffering, basically creating latency. And you can't have that in... Exactly. So if the buffer is too big, the latency is too high, you can't really talk to anybody. If the latency is too low, then the packets don't arrive on time. You have breaks in the voice. And that was really the key of the invention, is how to monitor and how to adjust this buffer size to fit just exactly the network conditions. So if you had good network, latency would be nice, and you could have a normal call. If your network is bad, then it's bad. But obviously, you need to still recover from packet loss and conceal the missing portions of the voice and so on, and deal with the problem that makes on the jitter buffer. So this was really the part that we patented, or maybe one of the first patents that we did at VocalTec. And there are a few people here from VocalTec, so that's part of the history. We also had to understood that we need to have a software-only solution. If initially we sold the sound card and something, we needed to have something that could be downloaded on the internet. And again, those was the early days. You could download stuff, but from I can't even remember what was the name of those servers. People were putting stuff in their homes so others could download. Exactly. So we had to come up with some solution for downloading the software and so on, and collecting money, because e-commerce didn't exist at the time, and this was really, and we also had this understanding in our head all the time that time to market is something that's very important. We can't miss the window here, because somebody is always working on the same thing that you do somewhere in the world, right? And if you want to be first, you have to really push hard to be the first. So a lot of hard work and trying to solve all those problems, which we actually were able to solve. So we had to come up with a real-time software compression, which didn't exist at the time. It's not that it didn't exist. Compression existed, but CPUs were not strong enough to compress it in real time. Not store it, send it even. But still, you have to compress, 1 second of voice in less than 1 second of voice, right? And time. So you can still do other things on the computer. To solve the dynamic IP address, we were using the IRC network, and the IRC network was operated by the IRC is Internet Relay Chat, and it was operated by universities. And so we were kind of mimicking an IRC client, and when two people connect to the IRC network, one can find out what's the IP address of the other person, and then they can send packets to that person. And we didn't have to deal with firewalls or routers at the time. That was something that Skype solved later on when they had to deal with different problems. But at the time, this was the solution for the dynamic IP problem. We did get lucky though, right? Because we had the technology from the days that we developed it for the LAN. So that gave us a huge, time saver, I would say, if other companies want to see that, and they had to develop the same technology. We had all this experience with dealing with voice and signal processing and so on, which really gave us an edge there. And then we still had the problem of the bandwidth, right? And we could compress to almost 14.4 K, but it wasn't just enough. And then Rami Amit, which some of you here know, came up with this concept of being able to take every 3 bits that you want to send instead 1 bit, but lose not 66% of the information, but only 25% of the information. And the solution is so simple and so efficient that it was just amazing. And this really solved the problem. I don't even think we filed a patent on it, but it was just very simple. And this really dropped the bandwidth to the level where we could actually use 14.4K modem. We made it so efficient and so on that we could use the compression in real time on everybody's home computer without, buying the best and most expensive computer and so on. We solved the e-commerce problem, being able to charge credit cards and so on. We were setting this internet download, and interesting enough, we actually had to pay somebody that had a patent on it. And obviously you don't expect somebody to have the patent on downloading from the internet when it was never done, right? But apparently this guy had a patent that was maybe 15 years ago, before that. It didn't even envision internet, but in his mind, you would go to a kiosk or a store, convenience store, and you want to buy a tape, music tape, right? So this box that he had invented would take the audio and record that on the tape so that you would get the tape on the spot. So basically, the patent is generating the product on the point of sale. And this is exactly when you download and pay and get the product on your computer, that's exactly what you're doing. And he actually, tried to sue us for this. So we had to pay them. And we did, for every download, we had to pay something. And really in 1995, when we had everything solved, February 95, we launched this product. It looks about this was the user interface. You could put some quick dial buttons here, and so on. And we had very good PR people from the days of the Lotus days, and really got a lot of for a small company. We got so much PR that it was really, really tremendous. But maybe that's another pivot point. That's where the problem started, because when those universities operating the IRC network started to see clients coming in, it says iPhone something, because we called it iPhone at the time. Well, we actually used the name. The name was a registered trademark of another company that was eventually bought by Cisco, and this is why Cisco had some claims with Apple. But they gave us the permission to use the name. So we were using iPhone, and it says iPhone something, iPhone. So you see in the IRC, you see all those clients, and nobody's talking, because we weren't actually chatting over this. We were just using it to get the IP address, right? And they started fighting back. They started publishing patches that prevented us from connecting to that, and so on. And this is where actually Jeff Pulver, that most of you might know, really invented himself, because he said he was a ham radio operator, Chovev Radio, and he liked to talk to people. And when he discovered this iPhone, immediately, he liked it very much, and he started talking to people about it and whatnot. And he was a person in some company. And when he heard that universities are starting to block us, he called us and said, listen, I have a T1 coming out to my house. People had 14.3 modem. The guy had 1.4 megabit coming to his home, right? He says, give me one of your servers. I'll put it in my home so you could use it, okay? And we did. So he was just, being nice because he wanted to use it. So he created that, and then that gave us time to actually talk to service providers and put servers and build our own IRC network. Also, the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. I went there for a meeting. I think it was Stockholm or something, and I was handing out free coupons so you could download, because we were charging like $50 per download, and I was handing out free coupons for people. And And, you know, initially people didn't know what it is, and then they started asking and so on, and then they became very angry. You know, they immediately wanted to shut this down because that would take all their precious bandwidth off the internet, right? You know, they were visionary people, but they thought that, you know, the telecom was so such a large industry that just thinking about it, moving onto the internet, which was just at the beginning, was incomprehensible, right? So they just didn't want to have it, and they immediately started creating those working groups about how to block voice and how to make it not work well on the internet. But not everybody was, you know, at the same opinion, luckily. And voice over IP just refused to die. But really the two, you know, the interesting two believers that I can name, you know, is Professor Henning Schultrein, who was back then a PhD student who was working on RTP, which is in the ITF, which is the protocol and the base of voice over IP, and later on SIP, which is today the protocol which is used for voice over IP and so on. And he was a big believer, obviously, and now he's the CTO of the FCC. And Jeff Pulver, right, which is back then was just a hacker, and today just very rich. Because what Jeff Pulver kind of saw is that if that's so interesting, maybe I can create a conference out of it. And he created the VON conference, the Voice over the Net conference. And, you know, the first day of the conference, he comes to me and says, you know what, I made more money today than I made all my life. And, you know, so, and he, you know, got lucky over that time over time. So apparently it's good to believe in something and go with it. So here's what we went through, right? We started with a con artist. We were buying the company back. There was an issue with investors along the way because investors at some point become greedy. Investors, it's like a time bomb. And they became greedy, and they wanted to say, we wanted more money, get more money from other investors to extend the runway. And they said, no, you know, we'll give you a bridge loan and so on. We would object to getting any money and so on, to bringing in more investors, which sometimes they can do, in you know, if you're not careful in the investment agreements and so on. So what we did, actually, to get this, we had to actually give our personal guarantee to the bank and owe a lot of money to the bank to get money from the bank. You know, basically borrow from the bank instead of from an investor. And what that made is actually forced their hand to put some money, because we said, you know, if you don't give your own guarantees, then we take more shares. And so nobody took shares, but we got the money. But we had to, you know, make sure that we make good on that loan. And it was a lot of money for somebody who, you know, couldn't afford a car. We did bet on the fact that audio would become pervasive and every computer would have voice capabilities. We did bet that voice over IP is going to be, you know, it's going to work and it's going to replace PSTN telephony systems, and that was a gamble, I would say. And after we actually succeeded and became a public company, we got this dream customer by the name of Deutsche Telekom, right? The German phone company. It was something like an $80 million contract, right? But the problem was that, with such a customer, you can't say no. If they tell you develop X, then you develop X, right? Because everything was new. And they thought they knew where the market is going. And when the contract ended, like 2-3 years later, everybody had voice over IP, and we didn't have anything to sell. So that was part of the decline of the company. Then obviously hiring the wrong CEO along the way, you know, finding a person we thought might be a good fit from ECI. Wasn't the best fit because ECI was like קופת compared to VocalTec, right? And it was, you know, the guy hired somebody to answer emails. So that wasn't a good fit. And but luckily, those few good bets really, and really very hard teamwork, because it's not me that did all that, right? It's really a group of people that were very dedicated to the goal and really wanted to make a difference. And obviously luck, you know, you said you don't believe in luck. I would say luck is a big thing of everything. So, you know, you could be as smart as you want, and try to make your own thing, but you need to get lucky. And sometimes you can make your parents proud, you know. There is I don't know if you know what it is, but this is actually a stamp that was developed by I guess the DOR or whatever, for voice over IP, and you know, my dad here is getting this reward. Chagai was getting the reward from Shimon Peres or whatever, and when they launched it, so that was a good thing. So that's VocalTec, and so let me talk about mentorship a bit, because obviously, you know, over time when you do a startup, you talk to different people, and you need some advice, right? The question is, you know, how to really treat advice. So let me start with this. You know, when you do a poll, when you ask people all different things, yeah, VocalTec had a bunch of patents, which, as far as I know, they licensed to different companies and made, you know, maybe $20 million licensing those patents. And those companies, some of them are suing other companies today and whatnot. And sometimes I get to consult to different companies who are getting sued, and you know, they're being sued on some patent which is definitely after VocalTec was doing all the stuff that it was doing. And so I need to testify and say, you know, yeah, we did that before, and here's some of the patents, and you know, and so on. And they bring experts that actually run those internet phones on old computers just to show that it's doing what it was doing. It's amazing to see. No. What we did back then, no, but when we moved to IP, we actually developed something. And then at some point, we decided that in order for something to be a standard, you need to establish something which is, you know, which is standard. So we went to GSM, and we moved to the compression to GSM. Computers became more efficient and or more stronger, and we could actually use GSM on the computer. So what we did, it was tough to find who owns the patent for GSM. But I did find somebody who was able to sell them, and it was Philips. And they wanted like something like $100,000, which we couldn't afford. So what I did, I actually went to a competitor, and I told them, listen, let's share that, and I'll offer Philips to get the $100,000, but from both of us. And this way, we could also be compatible, and that would be like a selling point, right? And so so we came together, and we actually bought it together, and everybody paid that. So, so here's the thing: when you ask people, when you do, you know, some of the, when you have a poll, right, like election poll or whatever, you need to have a specific sample size, right? You need to ask enough people to get the right result, or to understand what's the result. And you know, there's a simple formula that's here: n equals 1 over b squared, where b is the error, and n is the number of people that you ask. And if you ask 100 people, you can get the results of plus minus 10%, you know, error. If you ask 2 people, if you have a sample of 2, then the error is it's huge, right? And it's, and if you ask somebody who had, if you ask two people, then you get, 70% error, which for you doesn't really help, right? Just as good as gambling. So the thing is that most people, like me, did 1 or 2 or 3 startups, right? And so if you ask for my advice, I have only a sample size of 3, right? So I don't know if it's good enough or not. But some people that actually succeeded think that they know the formula, right? And they will try to tell you exactly what to do, right? But the thing is that the time that they did it, between the VocalTec and now, it's a different time. There's different internet, there's different technologies, there are different market players, right? Some of the people I knew doesn't even exist today. And the people that you deal with are also different. So, I can tell you something, but it's, might be the wrong thing to say. So, some things are the same, right? Buy low, sell high. But the rest of it is not always accurate. It's always the details that really makes the difference. If somebody tells you, oh, yeah, somebody has that application, or somebody has a patent on it, and you go and check and you look at the details, it might be totally different. So, but there is the opposite problem. And this is that entrepreneurs, have some confidence to do what they do, right? And sometimes they think they know the best way to do things, which is not always the right thing to do. And I heard about the survey that was done. They were asking people to estimate specific measurements of, how much a bottle of wine contains, or how much does, a chair weighs, or whatever. And they give them a range, like say from 1 kilogram to 5 kilograms, or whatever. And people have to guess. So they asked normal population, and they got an error, which they didn't even expect. But they got a huge error, like, 30% from the real measurements. And then they went to Harvard graduates, and they did the same survey. And you would expect from Harvard graduates that you would get better results. And the result was the opposite. Because people that, believe too much on their own instincts and tend to be wrong because the instincts are not always correct. So that's so the problem that I see in this space is that in Israel it's really Israelis think they know everything, and in the U.S. it's the same. It's Israelis, but it's actually what's called Ivy League graduates, from the major schools that you could probably know the names of. It's the same type of people. That's maybe the worst. I don't know, maybe. Well, I'm not into politics, not in Israel. So, so the thing is, you do need to listen to people, but always keep an open mind, because sometimes you don't even know what to ask, right? When you talk to people with an open mind and you not close yourself to trying to listen to what you want to hear, then you start realizing that there are things that maybe you've missed, and maybe you need to ask different questions and so on, and you really get to learn about it. It's always good to have and ask people that have some gray hair, because they have more experience, and and I see today that some of the things that people do repeat, right? So if you look at those repetitions, maybe you can have some insights. And the thing is, after you talk to people, then you need to make your own decision about, what's good for and what fits your specific startup company. Another thing is investors. And, talking about lean startup, I don't know if he talks about not getting money from investors, but it's always a good idea to try and do it yourself before you actually talk to investors. But investors are not very good for a company, specifically when they can smell some success, or if they smell delays, right? In both ways, which is always the case, right? It's either you succeed or you have some delays. So, yeah. So, you know, if you completely close the company, maybe that's a good thing because you don't owe them anything. But generally speaking, they're not good friends of the company. They seem to be initially, but they're actually not. And the people that you deal with in the VCs are also people that sometimes maybe had 1 or 2 successes or maybe never. They just graduated with good grades somewhere. Or in Israel, there's a different story where they are actually from the Air Force. They're pilots. It's like a closed industry. If you try to get into a VC and you're not a pilot, you'll find a hard time getting in. So they may have good, you know, few good flights, and they did some good things. They're good people, but not always for you, right? So you have to be careful of, you know, of investors. And some of them have what I called, and I didn't name that, it's the house on the hill, Jen. And that's actually a true story that I heard from an investor. After they made the investment with the startup company, they took the CEO, and, you know, they're walking on the beach and, you know, being friendly, and they say, you know, to the CEO, you see that house on the hill there? You know, if you work hard and, you know, this product, you do everything that you said, and this product is going to be a success, this house is going to be mine. Okay? So, you know, they take care of their own business, not your business. So, you know, talking about pivot points, I'll give you a few more examples here. You know where you start, but you don't always know where you finish, even though you have that vision. But as you saw from VocalTec, you know, starting with sound cards, finishing with voice over IP, it's not always clear where you go. And, you know, talk about those few different type of pivot points. Yeah, sometimes the goal changes. And it's nice to use the same technologies and the same knowledge that you acquired so far in what you did so far, so you have a head start. So another company that I did, after I finished my VocalTec chapter, I actually went and did my MBA, which was very interesting to do at that stage of life because I've done most of the things that you learn about, and so it gives you some nice background and nice, I would say, infrastructure, right, or base to what the things that you think you know. So it was the first time that I actually enjoyed school, as opposed to all the rest. But I did this MBA, and afterwards decided to start a new company with this dream that I had, where I thought to myself, you know, if you want to build a good team, sometimes you have this limitation that you can't bring them all to one place. You know, maybe this guy is in a different state or in the US and Israel and whatnot. And how can you take a group of people and create this synergy, let them work in a way as if they're sitting in the same room? Okay, this was the problem that I was trying to solve. And I came up with this interesting concept of very sophisticated conferencing bridge that you can have a conference, an all-day conference. You could still receive calls on the phone and use it and talk privately to your wife and whatnot, as if you're sitting in the same room with the other people. And started developing it, actually got funding for that. And why did I get funding? Well, first of all, I thought I was smarter, right? Because I had all that experience from VocalTec. But what happened since the investment in VocalTec and since 1999 was that the investors, when I had one investment done, right, they had 100, right, deals that they did. And they became very sophisticated. And their investment agreements became very sophisticated. And you know, when we did VocalTec, I don't know if you guys have startups or not, but there is this thing about common shares and preferred shares that the investors usually get. So at VocalTec, we only had common shares. So imagine the difference, right? When you have common shares, you know exactly how much you have. When you have common and preferred and A and preferred B and C, and then you don't know exactly what's going to happen when somebody invests, the first thing is this preferred is getting everything, and then this preferred, and then whatever is left is shared among everybody, not to the common, among everybody. So you never know what's going to happen if there is an exit, and you need a very huge exit to even get something. But at VocalTec, it was simpler. Everybody had common shares. So it was much easier to manage. So I thought I knew what I'm doing getting into that, but it was really a mistake because, and the investors are really superficial, were really superficial in this case, but eventually they invested like maybe $5 million, which was a nice amount, and I kept control of the company. But by the time we developed the product and so on, we ended up again with reality. And there were now free conference calls starting to happen, and people were asking, how can you charge for something if somebody else is giving it for free, right? And the economy started to tank, and companies stopped. The phone companies started buying anything, and the investors were thinking about, why do you want to go into the software as a service or services business model? Why don't you sell products to those phone companies? And why did they say that? Because the Ivy League person who was sitting there didn't know to sell anything else. He thought, he's done it sometimes in this business. That's the right thing to do. But it wasn't the right thing to do for us. And the investors wanted, again, greed wanted to make it very hard for us to raise a second round. And they delayed it all the time because they wanted to, again, they had this mechanism where they get the company to the point where there is no more money, and then they tell you, let's give you a bridge loan. And a bridge loan has such bad terms for the founders and everybody in the company except them. And you don't have a choice. You have rent to pay, you have salaries to pay, and so on. And one of the interesting stories about that is that I was very disappointed that after a board meeting, we were sitting in this board and we decided that we're going for a second round, and everybody the investor knew a few people. He said, I'll call them and get a meeting, and I knew a few people. I'll get those and get a meeting. And so a week passes by, and this investor guy is not setting up the meeting. Another week goes by, nothing. So, and by coincidence, and maybe a month went, nothing. And by coincidence, I had a flight to the area where this investor, the West Coast, where those investors had an office. So I had a few hours to kill. I said, I'll go to their office in the West Coast and, just use the internet to do something. I go up, I open the door, and I see a sign on the door that says, I look at the directory and it says, third floor. Okay, I go to the third floor. And it doesn't say the name of our investor. It says the name of the investor that we're trying to set the meeting with. And so I thought maybe I'm the wrong floor. I go back to the directory, third floor. I go back up. It turns out those investors were sitting in the office of the other investors that they were trying to set a meeting with, right? And they couldn't get this guy to meet. They just didn't want us to meet them. They were blocking us from getting. And, the economy went even worse, and eventually we wanted to sell. Eventually we wanted to sell the company. We had to sell the company. And even then they made some, some things. And it was just a disaster. So, so not liking investors is really something I think you should adopt. But, but don't take my advice. So, so let's move a bit on and see. So eventually we did sell the company, and then I actually had to work. We sold the company to VCon, which was an Israeli company, and eventually I worked there for a year and then moved on. So came up with another idea. And this idea actually I thought about in 1996, the first day that we came out with video over IP, right? So we added in 96, we added video to the internet phone. And you know, eventually, and I don't know if people can guess what happened after a few days that we came out with the video. Anybody? What? No. Exactly. Porn. Immediately. As soon as we added video, that was the main application. We couldn't talk, you couldn't talk to somebody if you did not take your clothes off. Right? Because you open you're trying to call somebody, this guy's naked, right? He sees you have clothes, they shut down. So, well, you know what we did to test? We took actually an image. You know, the image was very small at the time, right? Low frame rate and so on. So we took a magazine, we showed a naked person, right? And we were kind of moving it while talking to somebody. So I thought about some concept around that, you know, and you know, trying to make some money out of that principle. But didn't do anything because I still had some few technologies that needed to improve, like better video, better payments, and so on the internet. And so after I finished with this other project, I decided that I'll go again and try, you know, take this idea and try to make it a reality. So I took, initially I was trying to find partners that would invest their free time after work, you know, to develop that. And I couldn't find people that had this, you know, entrepreneurial spirit to say, you know, yes, I'll invest my free time for something instead of getting investors. So eventually I went to investors. I got an angel investor this time. That was a bit different, but obviously it was a very small amount of money. But it did get the business going. I got a partner, we started working, and I actually cleaned the porn thinking that I had in my mind and made it something which didn't have any porn in it and became Beatwine. The name doesn't have anything to do with what it does, but it's basically a website that enables an expert to provide services for a fee. So if you want to get somebody, you have a problem on your PC, you go there, this person, you find somebody who has PC knowledge, and the guy says, you know, $1 per minute, okay, you hire the person, you talk to him, you get the advice, 5 minutes, it's done. And my thinking was, you know, maybe it would become porn, but it didn't because we used PayPal and so on, and PayPal doesn't allow any sex-related stuff, so it became a normal site for advice. And again, we were trying different things, and there was an Israeli company who was actually in that space, Kasamba, and they were doing psychics. And talking about, you know, market fit, right? They were doing psychics, and we said, you know, why focus on psychics? There's lawyers, doctors, you know, why focus on psychics? Psychics? No, it's psychics. They would tell you your future. No, I'm telling you it's not, because now I know the business. There is some people who may hide it around that, but the psychics that we have really give you psychic advice. Try it. No, try it. I don't know what if people use it instead of sex. Maybe it's a type of sex I don't understand, but maybe. Right. They decided to stick with it. Right. And this is almost what happened to, well, it's actually exactly what happened to us. We tried different verticals and we tried to kind of sense, you know, what's working and what's not. And we had some success, but not very huge success. And then we found this group of investors that said, we'll buy the company and off you. And we thought, you know what, it's not going very well. Maybe we'll just sell them, they'll invest more money, and we'll take it to the next level. So we did stay small shareholders in the company, and they were actually committed to put some money in, and they did some at the beginning. But luckily, we had this clause in the agreement that said that if they don't put the money, we get the company back. And then again, the 2008 downturn, they didn't want to invest any more money. We got the company back. Okay, I was already doing phone.com, but at this point, what happened is that we noticed that all the first advisors were psychics, because the ranking system, put the people that made money on the top on the homepage. And so we said, you know what? Let's convert it to a psychic page, and that's it. And it's growing ever since. Yeah, it's just growing ever since. And it's growing ever since, and it's very nice. And what we do now is actually try to find the next set of, let's call them enthusiasts, to another group of people that that has the same characteristics of something which is a bit addictive, maybe, and so on. And we think we found it. What's that? Exactly. Talk, yeah, if know the future. So that's bit one. So I had this idea here, and ended up with something different, but at this time it worked. But at this point, I'm only a shareholder in this company. So the last thing is really maybe the one company that I work now in. It's not, I didn't found the company, but I was hired, maybe the first person to be hired in this company after the CEO. And it's hosted PBX services. If you don't know, it's like your office phone system, but it's all hosted. You don't need to install anything in the office. You don't even need phones. You can use your cell phone if you want, and you can still transfer calls and have voicemail and voicemail transcription and every feature that you can think of at the office, you could have with your cell phone. It's not the most convenient, but you can do it. It's in the U.S., and and we see ourselves innovating in a different space, not in the technology, even though we have nice technology there, but it's more on customer support. It's about being able to provide a very cheap service to a market that other people find hard to compete in, which is the very small businesses, like 1 to 5 employees. A big company, they can't afford to talk to somebody who has 1 to 5 employees. And for the startup companies, and we do it a lot in the US with meetups and so on, we offer the entrepreneurs free phone numbers for a year. So they could use the service for limited amount of minutes and whatnot, but they can start with it, and then they can add, if they grow, they can add phones, they can add phone numbers and so on. And willing to give that to you guys as well. And for you, I don't know if it matters, but you can have US numbers and get the calls here if you want, as if you're in the US. Or all over the world, actually. Phone.com, yeah. And so it's interesting to see how this company, shifted, right? But I'll talk about this in a second. Again, trying to figure out what the market, right, for a specific product. And basically, if you look at the different companies, and if you look at small businesses, they don't have a good communication solution because they can't afford to have an expensive PBX or a switch at the office. Sometimes they don't even have an office because they work from home, from different homes. Exactly. And then they have the consumer voice over IP, which is, from the cable company, like you can get here and so on, but that's not a business solution. Yeah, Vonage, it's not a business solution. You can have extensions, you can have one number calls everybody and so on. So like, think about, the Google Voice, right? But Google Voice is more for one person. It's not for a business, and it's not, you can't grow with it. And then smartphones are really good for every business, but mostly email-oriented. They're not, really for a small business or specific for a small business. So, and there's a huge market for that. And so we tried to really innovate in a way that would set the product, the right product for this specific market. And I'll try to make it short, you'll have the presentation later if you want to see the feature, but, the easiest way is to go to phone.com. One of the things that that we do is HD voice, which is high definition voice, which is a nice trend that's starting to be with voice over IP companies and so on. We also have an API, so if you want to do something and integrate that to your own service, an API is a good addition. And there are a few players, but we're trying to be. Yeah, there is an ACD, but no, not. Yeah, there is an ACD. Q, but it's simple.
An API which small startups can create, like a phone number from USA, for example, to our phones in Israel, and to get to supply some service.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And if the API that we have today is not sufficient, then we're soon adding a lot of features. So in the
payment is time.
Yeah, it's per minute. Yeah.
A US VIP forwarded to an Israeli number.
So yeah, you can do it. Okay, but let me just finish with two more slides here. So the way we changed the company actually was. It started as from somebody buying domain names and selling it. Think about, phone.com is a prime domain name, right? You pay millions to get this. And so this guy was actually, this entrepreneur was actually just buying and selling domain names. That was his business. So he bought the domain name and then he thought, maybe I'll flip it. I don't know if you know this program, Flip This House. You buy something cheap, you fix it, and then you sell it. So he thought, yeah, maybe I'll find somebody to do it. And he found Ari Rabban, who's the CEO of the company, was actually working at VocalTec. And Ari started working on it and then called me to join. So we started as a virtual service, meaning you just forward calls. And then we moved to a physical service where we actually give you phones. And we started from reselling another company, and then we created our own technology. So we do our own stuff, so we're a service provider. So the company made some shifts until we kind of managed to get this thing right and sell this to this market. And you mentioned about making those shifts, and as the company grows, those shifts are becoming harder to do because now you have to shift a lot of people from doing what they do now to doing something new. So it's better to do it quickly when you're still small, and then think more about those changes because you can spend a lot of money if you shift and it's not the right direction. So a few final words. First of all, keep a file with ideas because, you walk around, you think about something, and then you forget about it. Just write it down, put it in your drawer. So, next startup, when you're done with the first startup, you can open the drawer, look around, and see what happens. And you need to keep adding because ideas, expire. Somebody else is doing it. So again, identify problems in your surroundings because if you solve them, that's an opportunity. And if the problem is more complicated and the solution is complicated, then the reward should be usually is higher. One of my dealing with investors, I found out that it's easier to sell them a PowerPoint than a real product because when you make a lot of effort, you build this website, and to show them that it's working, and you go there and they say, "Where's the traction? Show us traction." Oh, come back in 6 months when you have some people using it. But you said, "I need the money for marketing." Yeah, wait 6 months. So, but if you sell them the dream and the PowerPoint, they'll invest because, oh, this could be huge, right? So, try it and tell me what's your experience in that. Never say the word simple to an investor. If you do go to investor, initially I went to an investor and I showed them something and I said, you know, this is very simple, right? And when they hear simple, they hear, oh, there's no barrier for entry. Everybody could do it. Yeah, but somebody told me, are you an idiot? It's simpler for you, but they don't get it, right? Okay, so don't say the word simple. Make it, you know, complicated. Same slide, just write complicated. Extend your runway, because you need to have this, you go through this line, right? So make sure you don't waste money on, you know, ping pong tables if you don't have to, because you will need that money to keep going when you are at the end of, you know, when you're almost done with the product and almost selling it. You need this extra space, extra time to really get it out. Never work for free, right? Because you mentioned our resource is time, right? So, and some investors, they expect you to work for free. When there are problems, you should work for free. So don't try not to do it. You know, make sure you put some money on your time and say, you know, every hour that I work worth money and eventually equity. And ask many, decide with the help of few. Make sure you get advice from people, but you know, make sure you don't make decisions based on everyone's advice, but make your own decision. Be humble, listen to others, keep an open mind, find good partners. Investors also like to see partners. You know, one person is not a guarantee to success. You know, if you have good partners, it's much better, it's much more fun also. But it's not easy to find good partners because everybody has their own interest, their own phase in life. You know, this guy wants to have kids, the other one wants to get married, and so on. It's tough to find good partners. But when you find one and you have the synergy, then you see people that are getting much more than just the sum of the people. Always have a business model. I don't like those free things. I like to see that I know there is something to sell and there's people that are willing to pay for it. If nobody is willing to pay for it, it's probably not as good. You know, we saw Google, but Google have some business model, right? And luck has a lot to do with success. That's my experience, but you know, you have to take it as it is. And be nice to your employees. I have people that, you know, people don't forget. And I have people that I've hired that still remind me when I meet them, you know, how nice it was and the experience and so on. And as you can see at phone.com, you know, this guy hired me back, right? So, so you never know. So that's it.